Welcome to the Backstage Creative, the podcast that focuses on the people who work behind the scenes of theater. I'm the host of this podcast. My name is Krista Copper. On this show, I have the privilege of sitting down and talking to stage managers and music directors and designers and technical directors, and I get to pick their brain and ask them how they stay inspired and how they grow in their job and how they come up with the art that goes on stage and how they handle conflict. And if they're in a leadership position, how they work to lead well and communicate. Today's my conversation with Jordan Standlee. Jordan is a woodwind player who's currently on the national tour of Beautiful, the Carole King Musical. Jordan and I have worked at several of the same theaters, but never at the same time. I've heard about Jordan many times, and he has a great reputation for being a phenomenal player and very professional in the pit. So it was fun to sit down and talk to him and hear about life on the road and to get a glimpse into the touring life of a musician. If you like this podcast, I would love to hear from you. You can find me on Instagram or Facebook, or you can leave me a rating or review. I would love that. I love to hear from people. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know if there's things you want to hear more of, less of. I'd love to hear all of that. So anyway, here we go. Here's my conversation with Jordan Standlee. You tour a lot.
I do tour a lot.
So what are some
or
of the
I
tours?
have been.
What are some of the tours that you've been on?
Let's see. I'll go in order from when I started. So I started in 2013 with The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. Then I did Anything Goes, Bullets Over Broadway, Elf, Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder, Elf Again, A Bronx Tale, and now I am on Beautiful, the Carole King Musical. But I'm on a short layoff, so I've been off this week. It's been nice to get just a little bit of rest.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, where do you go? Where's the next place that you go?
We pick back up for a one-nighter in Butte, Montana. Which technically we're there for 2 nights. Like we'll travel in the day before, and then we have one show in Butte, Montana. So takes you to all places you've never even dreamed of sometimes.
Have you had a favorite place or a favorite theater that you've played in?
You know, that's kind of hard to narrow it down. There's a lot of places that are you would probably never go that you do kind of find out, oh, that's kind of like an interesting town, and I would have never gone there. Mm-hmm. Like Sioux Falls, South Dakota is always one of those that I think of where I'm like, I've been there several times, and it's always super nice. I would have never gone there in my life, probably, and I probably never will unless I go on a tour. We were just in Greenville, South Carolina, another kind of like, didn't even know about that town, and it's a great little city, Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's kind of just those random ones that you wouldn't visit otherwise, I think is more interesting. Where like, the destination cities like Fort Lauderdale or I don't know, like places like that are, you play on tour, but you might also go there like on vacation or something. Those are nice too, but I think it's more interesting the places that are you would never probably go otherwise. Unless you're playing a one nighter, a 2 or 3 nighter or something on a non-equity tour or something, for example.
Yeah, I love that tours go to like everywhere. It's not just like Denver and Kansas City and Chicago, but like I love that tours go to like places
Abilene, Texas.
Yeah, Abilene, Texas. That go to places that don't have as much access, to art.
Opelika, Alabama. Places you would have never dreamed of going. But, but that is a really interesting thing about it is that like you said, places that may not have access to a lot of other arts or performance, you get to go be that for 1 or 2 nights. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of cool to get to, get an audience that you may not perform for an audience that may not always have access to getting to see something like that.
Mm-hmm. How do you take care of yourself when you're on the road? Either, you can go any direction, like physically, mentally, emotionally, musically.
Yeah, I think those are all, important in everyday life, no matter what you're doing. But, when you're traveling, it definitely takes a toll on you. Just physically, you're on a bus a lot of the time, and that is hard. You get cramped up and playing the same show every night, that can easily lead to like repetitive motion stress and, some weird imbalances in your body. I practice yoga, or I try to anyway. So, and it always helps if there's like a few other people in the cast or band that do something like that, because we'll sometimes, like, somebody will find a local class somewhere, and that helps if you have like a little bit of accountability. So a couple other people on this tour that I'm currently on, somebody will find a place, and then we can split a car to get to a yoga class. I try to do stuff on my own a little bit too. I was really consistent with handstands for so long, but I've kind of fallen off that. Just not completely, but I don't do it every day. Like I for like almost, I would say, like a year and a half, 2 years, I was doing like some kind of handstand warm up along with my show, like a paired behavior. It was like a warm up and intermission kind of physical warm up ritual. But like I said, I've kind of fallen off that consistency a little bit. But just keeping physically, I wouldn't even say like I work out very much, but it's just keeping moving, keeping things maintained, like changing the oil in your car. It's like I gotta stay on top of it a little bit, just because the travel and everything, and the sleep. You're sleeping in different beds, in different hotel rooms, so you don't always have like the same kind of rest, I think, that you would always have like in your own space. So yeah, it's important keeping it up, staying ahead of it.
Mm-hmm. How about musically? Do you? I'm sure you have like a set warm up, but is there anything else you found playing wise that you need to do when you're on the road?
And that's really tricky too, because so oftentimes you don't really have a space or an opportunity to practice, or you really have to kind of like seek it out. A lot of time it's just because of the sheer logistics, because your instruments are, I don't carry everything with me, like with my luggage. It usually travels on the trucks, which makes it really nice because I don't have to carry all that stuff around. But sometimes that means you don't have access to your horns either until you're allowed to be at the theater, because a lot of the time, it's pretty specific, the hours that you're able to access the theater, and then usually there's something going on. If it's like the first day in, they're doing load in still probably, and so all the crew is busy and working, and you kind of have to be mindful of what you're playing and how loud you're being and all that stuff. Or there's a put in rehearsal, say an understudy is going on that night, so they'll do like a 15-minute like crash course, like, oh yeah, this is what I'm doing up on stage rehearsing, and then again, it's not always a great time to be practicing. And a lot of the time it feels like that, like when you're at the theater, can't really like always just play like what you want and when you want. There are brief moments, or you have to go find some weird little room in the theater that's like not in the pit. And then of course, hotels too, which sometimes I will practice in hotels here and there, but again, it's loud, and there's a lot of people around, and it's not always just your theater people. There are just other like people, you don't want to get a noise complaint. So it's really tricky. I think it makes me be a little more I guess organized about the time that you have to practice, because it's a lot more limited, I would say, normal life. Like if you have your own space or studio to practice at.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big things that I found. Like as you get older, you have less time to practice, and so like you just become more like you get in the practice room and you're focused. You don't just go and play like things that you're good at, like you do maybe, like at least I did in college a lot.
Yeah. Oh my God. I remember just like like rambling is what I would compare it to, where it's just like, okay, well, I'll just go practice, but it was no like design or plan, because you just had all the time in the world, like in college or whatever. Now it really makes a lot of difference, and there are other people warming up around you too, so it's not always like you really have all the like space to make all the noise that you want. So yeah, you gotta be more organized about it.
Does it get hard being around the same people for a year? Like working with them, living with them, traveling with them, eating with them?
That's totally one of the big aspects about touring. Of course, like in any job, like you're around your coworkers a lot at work. But the unique thing about touring is, of course, you're around each other while you're at work, but then you're around each other when you're getting to the theater, and then when you go home, because of probably staying in the same hotel, home in quotation marks, when you go back to the hotel, there are people staying in the rooms, around you and beside you, and maybe you might have a roommate too who's also in the band or the cast or something like that. I think I adapted to that pretty well, and I think that's one reason why I've continued touring, is because I can deal with that. I would say I'm probably like a fairly introverted person in general, actually. So it does kind of just create a social circle that I don't, whether I like it or not, there's a built-in social network that you have. I think of, so my middle school band director, I remember, had this, how teachers, the classrooms, they all have all these posters and whatever around the room. One of hers, that was just hers that she made, and it was nothing fancy. It just said, good person, good student, good musician. So those are really important motto to live by as a musician, or whatever your trade or training is. Trying to just remember, like, okay, everyone's just a person. We all have our days that you're just like, you're sick of the bus, and you may actually just be sick, and everybody's like, there's a cold going around, and half of the cast is coughing and sneezing, and yeah, you do have those moments. Like, let's be honest, like, it can get be a little bit of a pressure cooker sometimes, because you're just around each other a lot. But that's part of the game. Like, usually if you've toured before, you understand that part of it. Generally, you're surrounded by people who are wanting to be there and in similar positions as you, so it works out.
Yeah, I remember my first few times in the pit, I didn't quite, like, people bothered me a lot more than in like normal settings, and then I realized, like, just like physical space, like, you're so much closer to people when you're playing. It took some getting
oh my
used
gosh.
to.
Yeah, it really, I mean, and of course every pit's a little bit different, but roomy is not generally a word for nearly all pits.
Yeah.
But sometimes you really do have space, and it depends on the size of your band and whatnot too, but in your section. But yeah, I mean, often you are really, really physically close to each other. Maybe not quite as close as you are like on the bus, because that's such a organized physical space as well. Yeah, you can be very close literally all the time. And that's thinking again about like practicing and like being aware of like the noise and what you're playing in such close proximity to your peers, is like, you got to be mindful of that. And you don't want to be the annoying, just making a bunch of noise in the pit because you're just playing and doodling. Because you're close. You're very close to each other generally.
Yeah. The pit is not the place to practice your concerto.
Yeah, not usually. Or like your triple F long tones, like, anyway.
Do you have any funny touring stories, like funny mishaps, or I don't know?
Yeah. So South Bend, Indiana. We were in South Bend, Indiana just earlier this fall. I want to say it was October, November. Super rainy day. Walking to the theater. I was either already dressed in my pit blacks, or I had my shoes on already, because I definitely didn't have a change of shoes or socks. I remember this because right before I got to the theater, I stepped in a huge puddle and like totally soaked, sloshing around in my shoes, water over the shoes, like gross, right? And it's like, there's no time to like turn around, really. It's like, I just got to go to the theater and deal with it. So I get to the pit, and I'm just gonna take off my shoes, like. And there are a lot of people, like, I feel like I've met a lot of musicians who actually play barefoot, and a lot of like keyboardists especially too, because you're using foot pedals. And, right, for me, I was just like, nope, my socks are disgustingly wet, and I'm not going to sit here. I'm in the pit. Nobody should see me. Well, of course, like, somebody's like looking over before the pit, like as people do, and then just wandering around the theater and looking around, and like an audience member, and she was like commenting about how I was barefoot. I'm like, oh, yes, sorry, whatever. So anyway, we play the whole show, and then at the very end, this guy stands up, and I'm like, I recognize this guy, and it was Chasten Buttigieg, like Pete Buttigieg's partner. I was like, we had heard rumors like maybe one of them or both of them could show up. It's it was South Bend where Pete is the mayor. I was kind of starstruck. I was like, oh my gosh, I recognize him. How cool. And I mean, he was the front row, and so he stood up during bows. So I, I saw him while I was still playing. And so, of course, we had to like finish playing Bows and Exit Music. And then he actually saw me. Like, I would try to like take a picture, but he totally like saw me. And I was like, I'm an idiot. I'm just going to go up there and ask him to take a picture.
Yeah.
And of course, he was like he obliged me. He was just super nice and friendly. And I was like, oh no, I'm barefoot. Like, this is so embarrassing. Normally I wear shoes. Sorry. But anyway, so I got a picture with him, but I was barefoot and my feet were a little still wet. So how cool is that? And you never know who's going to be in the audience. And that being said too, it's like, I wonder who has been in audiences that I haven't seen and I haven't met, It's like, you never know.
Yeah. Just the reach when you're on a tour is incredible. The reach of people that you impact.
Yeah. It was just the new year. So like, I don't know, I was doing a lot of numbers, a lot of counting as far as like, how many shows have I played? How many venues have I done? And like, I didn't do like number of audience members, but like, wow, that's kind of crazy to think about sometimes, where you're like, there's a lot of people in this crowd sometimes. I mean, sometimes not always, it's not like we're always sold out by any means, but even if there's just 1,000 to 2,000 people per house, like that adds up. So who knows who's out there?
So for people who aren't musicians, woodwind players typically play multiple instruments. Really, probably most people in the pit, now that I think of it, are playing some sort of multiple instruments. I mean, maybe violin wouldn't, but trumpet doesn't always. But a lot of us play multiple instruments. So what does that look like as a woodwind player? Like, what are the most common doubles that you have to do? And
so like I started on the saxophone, so that's still kind of like home base for me, I guess. But I also started clarinet fairly early, so it's kind of, I would say near, if you compare it to languages, it's kind of like I'm nearly native clarinet as I am nearly native saxophone. And then I added flute later on, I think when I was like 18, which is kind of like old for being like learning an instrument, I feel like. But it still always feels new. And, I'm about to turn 32. I've played the instrument plenty long enough to not feel like it's new, but it still just always feels like the new one, But that's a pretty typical standard instrumentation. So like alto sax, flute, and clarinet. And the books are just written like that. So, and oftentimes you'll change within numbers even, like within the same song. So it might start like, okay, you have an opening alto saxophone solo in the overture, and then you have 12 bars of rest, and then you switch, and then you play like the pretty flute melody over the synth strings, and then maybe that ends, and then the next song opens with like a clarinet solo. And and sometimes it's like more longer stretches. Sometimes you're playing like clarinet for the whole song or flute for this whole song. But then there are some books that you're like, compared to juggling, where you're like, okay, you got to put this one down and then pick this up really quick. And, sometimes you only have just like seconds really to switch. So the current book that I have, the doubling isn't too crazy. I mean, I am playing multiple instruments, but the switching isn't too quick in this one. I have one really quick switch where it's literally like a breath. And I mean, sometimes I don't even make it. Like it's like a slow down retard where I'm playing saxophone, alto saxophone. And then literally it's just, you have to just pick up the flute and play immediately. There's literally no rests written in at all. It's just immediate. Like I wrote, penciled in, like the very first day when we were rehearsing, I said, switch immediately, like, or two flute immediately. There's just absolutely no break. So I would say like the big band shows, those are the ones that are like more switchy, I would say. So like when I played Anything Goes and Bullets Over Broadway, that was just like non-stop switching. So you're playing saxophone solo, clarinet solo, flute solo, saxophone solo. It's just like you're picking up and putting down something different like constantly. So, but I like that. That's it keeps me on my toes. It keeps things really interesting, because when you play a show like on a long contract, you're playing it a lot of the same. You might play it 100, 200 times or whatever. And so you want it to be challenging and definitely like switching instruments that keeps you on your toes. There have been a couple shows, but literally just a couple shows that I've played just clarinet on. Like I played Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder. That was only clarinet. It was very much like a chamber orchestra, kind of Gilbert and Sullivan style. And then Gilbert and Sullivan shows are the only other shows that I've played just one instrument on, and that was just clarinet as well. I mean, the doubling thing, I guess it dates back for a long time, just because you get more sounds for fewer people, as my guess. You don't have to hire a separate clarinet person and a separate flute person if you can have one person that can play both things. Clearly, you can't have those sounds at the same time. You can only play one instrument at a time, but I think you achieve more of a palette of sounds when you have doublers, as we are referred. Doublers, although sometimes it's more than just a double. It's,
usually
it's
never
a
just
triple or a quadruple, or I mean, usually it's like 3 or 4 instruments generally. But yeah, like you were saying, I mean, pretty much every like our bass player, I mean, he's playing electric and upright. Yeah, guitars, they always have like a million guitars if you're playing a guitar book. Trumpet players all the time will have flugelhorn as well. Trombone is kind of the only one where I've played with where, well, I guess you could have bass trombone and tenor trombone. And the other great thing about it is often you get paid for extra instruments. So that's a motivating factor and a lot of the times to have an extra instrument, because you get paid a percentage extra for another horn. Not always, but depends on the setting and the contract. But
that's one of my personal like favorite parts of a show, when you first get in the pit and you have to figure out the choreography, and so like you're trying to figure out your space and like, okay, my upright bass, I don't have a stand, so I need to lay it down here, so I need to have the electric bass here and like my cables and like I like the challenge of like, okay, I'm in this super small space and how am I going to get between everything I need to and fast, and I think it's fun.
Yes, it's totally choreography. If I have a really quick switch for flute, I'll have to put it on my right side. Generally, I just have that stand that's on my right side a little bit closer to me, and I can grab it quicker. So sometimes I'll have to preset, something in a different spot, because it's like what becomes before that matters to be able to like get flute or the clarinet or whatever you have to grab like really quickly. I think of it as like kung fu hands. Like you gotta like you've gotta like really work on your reflexes. Like it's a silly thing to practice, and literally putting them on the stands. Like I remember it was like a breaking point when I could put down one instrument and pick up another one at the same time. I know that sounds really silly, but like that was a coordination that I like really had to, without feeling like you were gonna like throw it or miss the stand or the peg, because it's kind of like playing darts, because you're also like in a dark little pit. The stand pegs, you put your flute and your clarinet on pegs, and they're always black usually, and so you can't see that. So it's like, it's another stupid challenge where you're like, well, I thought I was fine after I learned my scales and my etudes, and now I can't put the instrument back on the stand. Like that sometimes is the hardest part, where you're like, I just can't see it. And then you're always like terrified to like miss it, because you don't want to like knock it over or just throw it on the ground, especially in those like quick moments. It's like darts or something where you're like, okay, you got to be accurate. It's just, you have to be just as accurate about picking up and putting down your instrument as you are playing the part. There's like a form and a technique to it as well, and that's another area where you can really screw up your get a repetitive motion thing, especially if you're playing like a bigger horn like a bari sax or even tenor sax. Like those aren't really light, and so if you're picking it up and putting it down in a weird way, or you're using your hand or grabbing it weird, that can sometimes lead to elbow pain or tendonitis or whatever. When you think it's just going to be like you're playing, it was just how I was putting it on the stand. Well, that's irritating. So
theater is fun. Like all the little things like that I never thought about until I got into theater. Like I'd never had to worry about like how much space my bow used up. Like, okay, there's not room for me to sit on a stool, so I have to learn how to stand properly and like balance my weight. And there's so many just like small, I don't know what you would classify them as, but like non-musical things that you learn how to do in a pit that you don't necessarily need if you're playing in like a jazz band or chamber music or whatnot. I think it's fun. Let's talk about your background, where you grew up, where you went to school, and how you got into theater and touring.
Well, I'm currently visiting my parents in the house that I grew up in. So North Fort Worth, North Richland Hills, Texas, the mid-cities, the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. There are many names. So I usually tell people I'm from Fort Worth, Texas. Sometimes I say Dallas, but if you're really from this area, you usually distinguish if you're from Fort Worth or Dallas. I'm from Fort Worth.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, and so I was here, and then for college, I went to the Eastman School of Music, which I graduated almost 10 years ago. Now that we're in the year 2020, I graduated in 2010. So I was up there in Rochester, New York for 4 years. And then I came back down to Texas for 1 year. I taught lessons in the schools that I grew up in and some of the other surrounding schools. Then I had a little music hiatus that following, like 2011. And I went to China. Was like teaching English and studying Mandarin Chinese, or trying to anyway. So I was out there for a few months. Didn't finish that out. I was supposed to be out there a full school year, and I was like, I wanted a little break from music that year, and I got it. I definitely took a break. I didn't play really any music or any instruments for probably like 8 months. Maintained like a little bit of flute, but I really didn't play saxophone, clarinet really at all. Just needed a break, and I think that was really good thing to just kind of have a clean slate, tabula rasa. And then, so I stuck around the DFW area after that, after I came back from China. And then I did a yoga teacher certification. So I worked in this yoga studio, or a couple studios around here. It was like a hot yoga, similar to like the Bikram style. And but we also did some flow classes and whatnot. So worked in some of those studios, and then also worked in the teacher training area. And so that was really good. Also, I think all of that really still contributes to playing music and just how I'm able to process things. Knowing my body, knowing how to use my body, knowing how to use my breath, and just kind of like how to process mentally some things. Some maybe high stress situations you may, when you're traveling 10 hours one day and then you have to play one show in a venue that you may really not love. And being able to process all that, I think is a good thing to know. Knowing yourself, knowing your brain and your body a little bit. After that is really when I started touring. So I guess I still worked in the yoga studios off and on a little bit when I started touring, because I started at that Christmas show, Grinch. So I was out, and then I came back, and then I was back at the yoga studio a little bit, and then I ended up dropping teaching anything in the yoga studios, and then I got a Prius. And so then when I was back and forth, like maybe on a layoff or like between contracts, then I was driving Uber in Dallas Fort Worth off and on for a little bit. So that was another interesting thing. Sometimes that was really fun and interesting. Other times it was just mind numbing and exhausting. I feel like people were interested in hearing about what I did in general, whereas like, oh, because I was Ubering definitely when I was on Bullets Over Broadway, and we would have layoffs, which is what I'm on currently right now, where it's like the show just doesn't happen for a week or maybe 2 weeks. Sometimes it's literally just because the trucks need to get to the West Coast or whatever, so they'll just need to have time to transport things, and so they'll just lay everybody off. So yeah, that's when I would do the Uber thing. So maybe 1, 2, 3 weeks at a time, and then pretty much everybody's taking the Uber ride. And sometimes you get those drivers who are chatty and passengers who are chatty and interested in talking about, well, what else do you do? Is this your full-time job? And I was always like, well, no, I'm currently on the national tour, Bullets Over Broadway, or whatever tour it was. And that was generally interesting point of conversation for my writers. But it's always funny because I think of like playing shows as literally you're doing the same thing over and over again. Well, so was that. I would say the same thing over and over again, basically. And then working in the yoga studio too, that was the same thing over and over again. We taught set sequence classes, so it was literally always the same moves, the same postures. A show where you play the overture, you play all the numbers, the entr'acte, it's like literally the exact same thing over and over again. So there's probably something in my brain that I really like doing repetitive things, because when I look at other things in my life that aren't doing musical theater, I see those patterns of doing something repetitive. Yeah.
How did you decide to take the theater route? Was it something intentional? Was it something that just kind of like you just got work and so it just kind of happened?
I mean, it was kind of shaped with my teachers early on. So my middle school band director, she was really influential and still is. And she was the one that kind of planted that seed, I think, where she was like, look, sure, plenty of people have careers playing music, but let's be real, it would be nice to have kind of like a more regular paycheck. And so you have, symphony orchestra jobs, and then you have this theater, and then that's about it. And plenty of people make a living doing music otherwise, but then those people, you have to do a lot of other stuff too, like if you're gigging or if you're playing in your own band or your own ensemble, because not only do you have to do the music side of it, then you also probably have to do the advertisement and the organization of getting your group together or arranging your music and this and that. Where, if you're in theater, sometimes there's pieces of that you do, but in general, it's more of like, it's a job, like that you get to focus more on just playing your instruments. That's pretty cool. And it had a lot to do with the instrument that I chose too, because I started on saxophone. Okay, so for a college degree, I did classical saxophone. Well, there's not a lot of careers in classical saxophone. Military bands or teaching is kind of like where you go with that in general, or you learn other instruments and you can double. And doubling is a skill for theater. And there are certainly doublers who play in orchestras as well too. Like I know that like especially like pops orchestras, if you're playing like the pop series or whatever, you may play, the bass clarinet player may also be playing like saxophone or something like that. It's definitely like a niche to be able to play multiple instruments in theater. My teachers from early on were smart in guiding me that way. And my private teacher that I grew up studying with, he was he played flute and clarinet. So I studied saxophone with him, but he always played clarinet in my lessons or flute. And then I started playing clarinet and flute with him as well in lessons. So, I didn't always really study with the saxophone person, even though I was quote unquote like a saxophonist. So I think that was really helpful and influential just in my development to always hear other instruments that weren't just my own. Miss Lansford, this middle school band director, her husband played in the Forward Symphony and then also played shows as well. So that was definitely why she was like, she was able to watch his career develop as a professional. And, just as a career, she was like, this musical thing is kind of fun. And I think it's so, I mean, I totally love it. I think it's a much more interesting way to experience and play music. Of course, I love, orchestra or just seeing like a concert of chamber music or whatever, but there's a lot more moving parts. There's a lot more stuff in theater. Music may not be the focus because there's somebody singing or dancing on stage, but I like that it's like there's a little more context for it. It's not just this abstract sound vibration. it actually goes with something usually. And theater, there's like drama and sex and cool costumes and cool stage effects and lights and fog and all these like theater magic things that you get to be a part of. But for your job, you really just have to play the music. But you get to experience all those other things by being part of that. And I think that's you don't get that if you're playing in an orchestra generally, or playing chamber music. There are ensembles and groups that are more theatrical like that. Some of the chamber musicians that I know, that I would say it's a form of theater where they play by memory, and there's movement, and there's often like they're speaking in between pieces and whatnot. So that is a more theatrical experience. There's more to taste. There's more to grasp onto as an audience member when you have more things to look at and see, I would say.
We're almost always multitasking, right? Like we're on our phones while we're driving when we shouldn't be, and we're like, we have so many
walking on the sidewalk and texting.
Yes. And so I think there's something, I don't want to sound like I'm talking down on orchestra, because right, that's where I come from, is like that orchestral world, and it's a great thing. But me personally, as an audience member, when I'm watching an orchestra, I just want something more. Like I want I want to be brought more into what's going on.
Yes.
And theater has a way to bring everyone together, you know, with the same story and the same experience that you don't always get at orchestra.
Focus.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, there's like a kind of focus that happens. I got to sit in a pit last night. I wasn't playing, but I got to go sit. I could see the audience, or some of the audience, and it was so cool. Like they were so into it. Some of them, like there were these like high school kids that were just 100% focused on the present, on what was happening. That's cool, you know. I'm like choked up thinking about it. Yeah, we're so unfocused so much of our like daily lives, and I think you're gonna have to edit the chokiness out.
No way.
You know, if you break it down, I think that's one quality that why people like theater. I mean, of course, like you don't always get that experience. Sometimes you're like, this sucks. That singer is like not in tune, and you know, like you know. But if it's really like hitting right, it brings you 100% to the present, and I think it's harder to do that with just music, or you know, just a solo piece or just an orchestral piece. You know, I think it's harder to focus on that. If you know, sometimes you need to have like a little more look here, which theater does that. It guides you to focus. I think that's kind of like that one of the unique qualities that really is, when you break it down, that's why people like being in the audience.
Yeah, and it's powerful too. Like they're all getting the same story. Like if 500 people are listening to Beethoven 5, I mean, the story in their head may be similar, but it's different. But with theater, there's a clear story, and I think there's something powerful of like we're all hearing the same story. You know, it's not.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's cool to hear, you know, something and it's your interpretation, and you know, certainly sometimes there's music is, you know, it's a requiem or like a
Sure.
it is designed for, there is some kind of design or story or situation that it's intended for, but often it's not, you know, and it's just like you can kind of like interpret it however you want. Fantasia was super popular for a reason. They put like music that existed already that was really amazing, and then they put cartoons to it because who doesn't like cartoons, you know? And it's thematic. I think it engages you more when you have a story to go along with it, or a visual representation to go along with what you're listening to. Yeah, you're right. If there's a script and a dialogue, well, you're all really getting the same story for sure.
So when I play, I always stand. Like I prefer to stand. I don't like to sit down and play. Most of the time, probably like 98% of the shows I've done, I can see the audience because I'm standing up and my head will be over the ledge of the pit. And my favorite, I used to get distracted by what's going on stage, and sometimes I still do. But a lot of times now I'm more distracted by watching people because I can see them, and so
seeing like audience reactions and facial expressions.
I'll check in out of the corner of my eye of like, oh, what are they gonna, you know? My favorite is when I can see two people that are clearly on a date. They come in holding hands, and one of them, usually, you know, if it's like a man and a woman, usually the man, you can tell, does not want to be there.
Right.
And then,
like, she dragged me along.
But then it's so fun to like watch them like unfold. I've seen that so many times. You know, they come in, you can tell they do not want to be there. They're grumpy, they're surly, on their face. But then to watch like throughout the course of the show, like to watch people like come alive and smile, and like their body language relaxes, and it's like it's such an honor, you know, to be a part of making people feel happy or making people feel something.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, we're really lucky to be able to do it. Of course, it gets tiring like any job, and you can complain about many things, but having a break, I think probably this week has really refreshed my desires and intentions of doing what I do. And like I said, getting to see a show last night was like, and I sat in the pit, so I didn't even see the show. It was The Color Purple. They were playing in Dallas, and I knew the drummer in the pit, so I was like, hey, let me sit in, you know. I didn't know anybody else, but the Reed guys were really cool, and they let me sit over there with them, and it was just like, so like, what a luxury. I get to still, you know, when I was going, I was like, this is going to feel like work, I guess. Like, I'm still in my pit blacks, and, you know, I kind of got to be on, like, you know, physically or mentally on a little bit. But once the show started, it was just like, it was so cool. I'm like, it's just like, I get to watch and I get to like be part of the pit, but not actually have to play. And I just got to observe, and that was really cool to see like the interaction of that band and how they work together. And like you were saying, watch a little bit of the audience and see their reactions. I could only see really probably the first 2 rows, and it wasn't even all of it, but I got to see quite a bit of just like people jamming out, rocking out, like moving to the music, or laughing, or being shocked, being sad. It's written all over people's faces, when they're really like in it. And so yeah, it's funny to see. But then of course you have some shows where you're like, I think everyone is asleep here. Like, it's a matinee, and you're like, check that person's pulse. That happens too sometimes, but sometimes you need to relax and rest, and that's probably okay if you fall asleep. Yeah.
Switching gears a little bit, how do you play consistently, right? Because consistency can be really hard, like playing with the same energy and the same tempo and the same intonation, same quality of sound. Is consistency something that comes naturally to you? Is it something that you've had to intentionally work on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely, I think everybody has to intentionally work on consistency. Sometimes some things, like let's say tempo, sometimes it's done for you because you're playing on a click. So you're listening in headphones and you have like a metronome going. Not all shows are like that, but it seems more and more, the more shows I play, the more times we have click. But I mean, honestly, I really like it because that's super objective, and you can't ever argue that, well, the dancers, it was too hard to do the choreography at that tempo. And we're like, it was the same tempo as last night. It was the same tempo every night because we're playing with the click. Like, it's a machine, it's a computer, and we were playing with it. So, some things like that we have the technology to keep the consistency a little more just there, and you don't have to think about it. But pitch, oh my gosh, like pitch and tone is like that for me, for my specific instruments. Like that's a really hard thing to maintain consistency, especially changing environments. And if you're playing with reeds, cane reeds, those will change in your environment. If it gets like really humid or really dry or really cold or hot, that changes things. And so in a way, that's kind of a nice thing because, after, let's say 100 performances, it's nice to have something a little bit different, I would say sometimes. But also it can be frustrating where you're like, this reed worked yesterday, but then we got to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and now it's freezing and my reeds are totally different. But then again, there's technology there. I mean, sometimes I play on synthetic reeds a lot of the time now on the road because that just stays the same. I don't want to have to think about it, like, or spend the time changing or finding reeds or breaking in new reeds. But yeah, consistency is it's the name of the game. You're doing the exact same show night after night, and it's got to be the same or better, probably. I remember when I was super young too. So my family's way into bowling, or my parents are anyway. And I bowled as a young kid. Probably like 3rd grade is maybe when I started bowling. I remember like having a total temper tantrum when I was probably like 9 years old or whatever, because like I got pretty good as like a 9-year-old bowler, right? And I just got super had a bad game or whatever. And I remember my mom talking about, oh, it's consistency. Sometimes you did it just right, and it was good. And then sometimes you had a few that were not right there, but that's fine. You just got to work on the consistency part of it. Of course, you're not always going to like every single time be at that same exact mark or level, but you got to like start there, and then after a while, then it just becomes remembering what that goal or certain level that you were working towards. And it's amazing to watch other people and how consistent they can be or not be. But especially some actors where I do feel like our jobs can be rather challenging, but I'm really impressed with actors a lot of the time where like the amount of things that they're doing, the amount of things that can go wrong with like costume changes and wigs and and their voice, your physical health has a lot to do with your voice, and when you're touring and changing environments, all of that's like really changing. And it's super impressive to see somebody just have the same timing, like comedic timing, they're acting and doing dialogue as well. And it's like, it's really impressive to see actors. And I think, and that's, one inspiring thing to keep your own consistency, is being surrounded by other people who can be so consistent, where you're like, how can you do that? And you just knock them dead every night, and you tell that joke that I'm sure you don't think is funny anymore at all, but you're able to have the right timing and intention behind it, that it just, makes the audience break. And being surrounded by people that are consistent, that's the best way to help your consistency, I think. Yeah.
Makes you step up. You don't want to be the weakest one.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it's a supportive, in a supportive way, Yeah.
Sure. Advice to young musicians.
Yeah. Okay, some like really basic things that took me the longest time to get used to playing with headphones, which is so silly, where it's like, you can practice with headphones anytime you're practicing. But I never practiced with headphones. I would practice with drones, but I would do it with like my old Korg tuners that would just like make a audible pitch from the machine and not use the headphone. Or, playing along with recordings, like if you're playing along with a solo or like a transcription, you're trying to transcribe something, play it with headphones. Because if you get into a pit or a recording studio, or even, I feel like even other, like big bands, you're using avioms or like these little digital, well, they're not always digital still, whatever. But there's these little machines that you can create your own mix, so, and you really have to have the headphones, because so many of the instruments are digital. So like the keyboards, like you wouldn't hear the keyboards unless you have the headphones on, or the electric guitars, or maybe the sound effects that are going along, that's somebody just cueing on a computer. But you need to be able to hear those things in order to fit your part in. But I just remember thinking it was so frustrating to just get used to playing with headphones when I first started, because it's kind of like if you're speaking and you plug your ears up, your voice sounds different to you. There's a similar quality playing wind instruments, because you hear it acoustically away from you, but then you also hear it in your own face or oral cavity, like from internally, kind of like how you hear your own voice. And so when you put things around your ears, that's like, it does weird things. And so it took me a really long time. And there's a cord, and you're like, wow, this is weird. Yeah. So it's like one of those really basic things where I'm like, man, if somebody had just told me to play with headphones earlier, I wouldn't have had such a transition period getting used to that. And then, of course, just listening to music as much as you can, and music that you like. And if you don't like it, then stop listening to it and then come back to it later. I don't ever really try to force myself to listen to things, because I really want to enjoy it, or at least recognize what's going on, or see some aspect or hear some aspect of whatever you're trying to listen for, listening intently, listening with focus. And it's so easy to listen to music now. Of course, I'm not ancient. Of course I could listen to music when I was growing up, but we didn't have Spotify and YouTube in my early formative years of as a beginner. And I just wonder what would I have been like now if I had been able to hear all these players and all these albums that you're supposed to listen to, that's so easily accessible on streaming services and YouTube right now.
Yeah.
Listen to anything.
The music for the Backstage Creative was improvised and performed by Ian Leroy, and the logo was designed by Zach Rimble.